pay attention to those things that bring you joy, you know, that you quote unquote waste your time on, because it can be incredibly important in finding direction later on.
Welcome to the Sharing Passion and Purpose podcast, a weekly podcast providing career and creative inspiration to help you build a purpose-filled life. If you're interested in tapping into your creative potential, pursuing a career with passion, and building on your biggest and best resource, yourself, please join me on this path. I'm your host, Nancy Moore, and I want you to know that I'm on this journey with you. So let's get started. Today, I'm visiting with Lisa Mast. She is the creator of Scissortail Digital, which is a professional photo organizing business, and she is also a creative entrepreneur. And a little about Lisa. After about 20 years in the classroom, she decided to make a career change and forge a new path. And she created this business that incorporates her creativity and love of storytelling. But she will honestly tell you that beginning again has been both a struggle and rewarding. Her current focus with Scissortail Digital is assisting people with digital photo organization and storage. And she will also share that she's on a mission to help people tell their stories in a digital format and help them with their processes in digital organizing. Lisa describes herself as a storyteller, an educator, and entrepreneur. And in our visit, I think you'll see why. Hello, Lisa.
Hello.
Thank you for being here.
Absolutely. I'm excited.
I'm always excited to visit with you because we had such a fun connection. Was it 2 years ago or last year? We met at Laura's
March.
March.
At her book launch party.
At Laura Tremaine's book launch party.
Yes.
And Laura, to me, is a connector anyway, but then to be in person and get to hear about her book and, you know, be a part of that, share your stuff. That was really neat. So anyway, I met you at that and we've connected and been in contact since, and now you're on the podcast. So I'm excited.
Yeah. So it's kind of a full circle.
Yeah.
Of Laura connections, which is fun.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, it is. So you describe yourself as a storyteller, educator, and entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. So we're going to unpack that in our visit.
Yes.
But I always love to start out by having people kind of tell a little about themselves. And so if you want to start out with that, that'd be great.
Well, one of the things we have in common, and we do with Laura as well, is that we're all from Oklahoma. That's where... Well, actually, I don't know. Did you grow up in Oklahoma? I don't know that. Okay, so yes. That's right. You're from Stillwater.
Yes. I wasn't born here, but I did. I was 2.5 when my parents moved to Stillwater.
Okay, fair enough.
So I'm going to say yes.
Okay,
I grew
so
up
all
here.
Okies.
Yes.
Yes. So I grew up, this is one of those, what's something unique about you? I grew up on an ostrich farm in western Oklahoma. I'm from Weatherford originally and left for college and was gone for about 20 years, came back 3 years ago, and am new to Tulsa, but Oklahoma is home, and Kansas, Virginia, Albania, and New Mexico have also been places where I've lived, and it's one of those things where there's always home, mm-hmm. but you have parts of your heart in other places because of the people and the places, so that's definitely true for me, but came back to Oklahoma. Family was a huge reason for that. And am pretty firmly set here, but travel's also a big deal. So it's not as though I will be here forever and always and not travel.
Yeah.
That would be too boring.
Yes. And we share that. We share that love of travel for sure.
Yes.
But one thing I wanted to make sure I mention is that you were in education.
Yes.
And were actually a teacher prior to what you're doing now.
Yes.
And so anyway, if you will just kind of share a little bit about that, and because I shared with you before we started recording, I have teachers who follow me and listen to me and are a lot of times burned out in their careers, and they'll maybe have a side hustle or something that they're doing to even financially make ends meet, but they're considering a career change. And it's difficult when you go to school and you major in, one thing.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I thought if you could just share a little bit about going from education and then share what you're doing now.
teaching is something that I still feel that I do.
Well, because educator is part of your 3 descriptors.
It really is.
Yeah.
I got to the point, absolutely burnout was a part of why I made a change. Mm-hmm. That's definitely part of my story. But I also got to the point where I felt as though to be an educator didn't require that I stay within academia.
Yeah.
So my degrees are all in music education and conducting. Mm-hmm. And I was later in going to graduate school. I'm a graduate of Heston College, Eastern Mennonite University, and then did graduate work at Wichita State University and the University of New Mexico. And so my master's is in choral conducting, and I have an additional graduate certification in the Kodály approach to music education from Wichita State. And Zoltán Kodály was a Hungarian musicologist, educator, composer, ethnomusicologist, which meant that he focused a lot on folk music and the connection of culture and music, and I could spend hours even just talking about that. But one of the nuggets from that is part of his belief and philosophy that music education and learning in general is lifelong. And it got to a point where I was pursuing my doctorate and things weren't really clicking. Mm-hmm. I'm an Enneagram 1 wing 2, and so there's that gut instinct piece that's a really big deal. And there were some things that just I knew weren't quite right, but I kept going. And in some ways, I think you continue to move forward until you find hard no's sometimes for direction. Mm-hmm. There were some doors that absolutely should have been open, and they just were staying locked. And I've learned enough through life experience that when something really, really doesn't make sense, it's best for me to take a beat and look around and see if I'm knocking on the wrong door.
Yeah, good for you. Yeah, yes.
What else do I need to be taking a look at here? Because it just like cosmically did not make sense. Mm-hmm. And those around me, mentors, colleagues, were like absolutely in agreement with me that something wasn't quite right about this. Mm-hmm. And it took, honestly, separating myself from my professional colleagues and from some of those mentors at the time, because they were very encouraging and affirming of me continuing to knock at that door and pursue that path. And I had to take time and evaluate what really mattered to me. Mm-hmm. And as I go back past all of this graduate work and everything, and I'm going, what actually matters to me? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we're going to talk about some of those pieces. The point I want to make was I identified that making a difference really mattered. Mm-hmm. And I kind of came up with this personal mission statement, and I had some application of what that could look like, but it was still far more general and broad. Mm-hmm. But I knew that what mattered to me was relationship and story. Mm-hmm. And I truly, truly believe that we can make a difference and we can see change in ourselves and in the world around us when we have authentic experiences with people whose stories are different from ours. Mm-hmm. And for me, music is a fantastic medium for making those connections. And when I came up with this, I was thinking a lot about what it looks like to have international connections. Mm-hmm. And having lived overseas, that was part of it. But when the hard part, honestly, some of that came back when I chose to move back to Oklahoma. Because it's one thing to be like, oh, here's my passport and look at this other pretty place. It's far more Instagrammable. Mm-hmm. The hard thing is when you come back to a place you're from and you have different perspectives and different stories. Maybe you vote differently. You have different opinions than someone who's your neighbor or a family member or a colleague. But I think it's just as, if not more important, to have genuine connections. Sit down, have a cup of coffee. Photography is another great medium for making those connections because there's shared story in that. Mm-hmm. So photography, music, travel, hospitality, those are all mediums that I like to say that I work in, but story is that common thread.
Okay. I had some other questions, but I really want to make sure we get into what you're currently doing.
Yeah.
And you are a creative entrepreneur, digital organizing photo business.
Scissortail Digital specializes in professional photo organizing, digitizing, and design. Yes.
Okay. I can tell you said that a time or two. Okay. So if you'll just kind of share, because I'm going to confess I have over 30,000 pictures on my phone.
That's not that many.
It's not that many on my iPhone. And if I lost this, I would be freaking out.
Yeah.
Freaking out. So, and I know about cloud storage and, I know about all of that, and I'm probably paying plenty for that. But if you would just kind of share a little about your business so people know about you as a resource.
So like I said, story matters a whole lot to me.
Yeah.
And I've had a camera in my hand since I was 1. You can go to my website and there's a photo of me with my very first camera from my grandma. Again, when I had to make some choices, and of course it's far more involved, but I have done a lot in technology and in photography. And so when I was able to make the step toward entrepreneurship, which was an absolute mind shift as well, to consider myself as a business owner as opposed to an academic. And like I said, I still consider myself an educator.
Yes.
So, and continues to be an evolution of changing that identity. My services are ones that people need, but they don't necessarily know are available. Because like you said, we would be very lost without these rectangle bricks that we carry around everywhere, and everybody has a camera in their pocket, and other photographers even will have a workflow for their professional images that they deliver to clients. But it's not unusual that I meet professional photographers who don't have a system in place for their personal images on their phone. So there's a real need for that. And the digitizing piece is everything from scanning images to converting that box of VHS tapes that you have gathering dust somewhere.
So you do all of that too.
All of that. And it's about story and making sure that they are organized, because I'm an Enneagram 1 wing too. So some of that comes naturally. I get excited. So some of it was recognizing natural tendencies. And there's a quote that I love and a book that I love that I've found since I've been doing this work that really sums up what I do. And that's the book Atomic Habits by James Clear. And he says in that, you do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And so my goal is to help people have a system to ensure that their stories are safe. We all are capturing stories with our phones, and you need a system. And people can be so overwhelmed, they just don't even know where to start. And so there's that educator piece in me that's also wanting to deliver resources, but also just say, let me come in and help you fix this. Because I have some systems that you can learn from.
Okay. So do you help people get set up with organizing their photos?
I work remotely with clients worldwide to be able to have a digital photo organizing system in place. So the basic organizing process, the workflow, is get everything in one place. Start with your digital photos, then we can digitize things and add your physical stuff in later. But we continue to add to our digital collection, so let's start there.
Okay.
So we get everything in one place, all of your sources. I go through and I'm able to eliminate true duplicates. Now, if you've got a series of 20 different, slightly different poses and different expressions, it's going to be on you to choose which smile you like the best. I'm not going to make that call. And sometimes people have over-backed themselves up into a corner, if you will. I've had some clients who have had up to like 17 copies of the same image backed up in different places because they were afraid they were going to lose things, but they didn't have a full system in place, or you just, end up with duplicates sometimes. We get rid of those, and then we put a folder system in place. That's broad strokes of what the workflow looks like. And then we back up to different locations. And I talk a lot about the 3-2-1 rule, which is having at least 3 copies of your organized library stored in 2 or more places, which may be multiple hard drives, or it may be different storage services. And at least one of those locations is going to be offsite or in the cloud. So you can make adaptations to meet your needs to that. But that's kind of a guiding principle, is the 3-2-1. And then you have systems and habits in place to be able to maintain that system. And some people have more particular needs that they need within their system, which is why I always start by asking, how does photography function for you? What are you currently doing with your photos, and what do you want to do? Because sometimes people have work applications for their photos, and they need to have access to certain collections of photos that are maybe shared, or, there are work purposes. And sometimes every year they do a family photo calendar. Well, how can we make systems and habits to make that more efficient and enjoyable, and for you to not feel overwhelmed by your photos? And then also learning things like Facebook is not a backup system. Whenever you post any images to Shutterfly or any social media service, is going to strip all of your metadata. And what happens with that? Please do not store on Shutterfly. Please do not just send images through DMs, because it strips your metadata, all of those things.
I had no idea about any of that. Okay.
Yeah. You had asked if I have some suggestions about what to do with your photos to back up. A couple of terms to learn real quick. Backup and sync, there's a difference.
Okay.
Sync is whenever you're able to see things on different devices, and iCloud is a sync, not a backup. So if iCloud, even if you're paying for it, if iCloud is the only system you have in place,
that's the only system I have in place.
You need to have another one, because if something happens to that, you only have one copy of your photo, even if you can access it from multiple devices. So I have a full breakdown of the difference between backup and sync on my website. You can go and find that there. And it's really important that you have something else in place, because technology will fail. Amazon Photos is a solution that I recommend for a lot of clients, because most of us are paying for Amazon Prime.
I am, yeah.
And with an Amazon Prime membership, you get free, full resolution, unlimited photo storage. Video storage is an additional cost beyond 5 gigs, which you're going to have more than 5 gigs, but it's incredibly reasonable in its cost. You can get 100 gigs of storage for video, photos free, but you can get 100 gigs for $20 if you go into the right place and make sure you have the annual cost versus the monthly cost. So that's a good starting place. The other rule is there's no one-size-fits-all solution. So while you can definitely learn things from my website and other resources, an advantage of working with me is it's going to be tailor-made to meet your needs. But start by having a backup system. And I talk a lot about having photos at your fingertips, because we all want to be able to easily get to our photos. And the retrieving function, if you've done all of this organizing, many backup services make it incredibly difficult to get your photos back and maintain your organization. And that's one thing Amazon Photos does really well. I used to be a big fan of Google Photos, and they're great for backup, but you can't maintain your organization. And whenever you go to export things, it's a nightmare to get everything out of there. So again, we could spend the whole podcast just talking about that. But know the difference between backup and sync. Don't just rely on iCloud, and work at having a system.
Okay. I'm going to link your
there's
information.
Stuff on the website, but start somewhere. That's the other rule. Do something.
Yes.
And know that Facebook is not a backup system.
Okay. Okay, this is so good to know. Okay, so when you said going from teaching and being an educator to being an entrepreneur is different, and I know you're still an educator, but what do you really like? What is something that really kind of stands out to you about being an entrepreneur that's different than, the education side of it?
I have a lot more freedom.
Okay.
I do have a lot more freedom to be able to focus on what truly matters to me. It doesn't mean that there is enjoyment in every single task that I have, because it's also uncomfortable. There are things that I don't know because I didn't, go step by step. And even though I have degrees, like everyone in in any field knows that as much as you have training, there are so many things that you have to learn on the job, right? And I don't have that. Okay, I didn't have your introduction to business class. Like, I didn't have any of those classes in college. So there's a lot to learn, right? I also see overlap in things. One of the ways that I describe my work is in 3 categories. There's the work of delivering the services that I provide to my clients. There's the work of maintaining a business. And there's the work of building a business. And it's a challenge to be able to dedicate time to each of those three categories simultaneously? And what do you prioritize on any given day? But I also see a correlation between that and my work when I was in the classroom full time. There was the work of actually delivering instruction to my students. There was the work for preparing for that. And in my case, there was the work of recruitment and building a program and all of that, which not every teacher is responsible for. Many teachers just, like, you teach this many sections and your students walk in the door, but music is different. And so there's that recruitment and the fundraising and all of these other pieces too. And so it's interesting to see that correlation.
So let me ask then, because the freedom of your time is big, and I hear that from a lot of people, you know, that flexibility that you have. But it also, you might be up working on a project at 10:30 at night, whereas, you know,
I did that in education.
Okay, you did that in education.
Are you kidding me?
Okay.
Oh my word,
so
my hours were horrible.
What's the downfall of being an entrepreneur? What's something that has been a little more difficult?
As much as I did not just work my contract hours in education, I have the opportunity to hustle and bring in more business with this. I don't have the safety net of knowing I will bring in this much every month.
Yes,
right?
A steady paycheck.
That's a challenge. There's a difference with
and
that.
benefits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That tension between those two things. And as much as I am a huge advocate for having systems in place, a big part of why I stepped away was because I felt the system was keeping me from being able to truly live out my mission as my purpose. As an educator, my hands were tied all the time. And having systems around you really limit your ability to be impactful and to be told, well, you do it for the kids, right? One of the things that really made me go, okay, you have to make a change. It was in that whole, do I keep going toward my doctorate or not? I have shower epiphanies. Like, there's something about the water, and this is like a documented thing. But I was in the shower one day and I just started weeping because this thought crossed my mind. I matter more than what I do. And I was someone who was incredibly defined. My identity was so tied up in what I did. And sometimes it was in a really positive, you know, and like I nurtured that identity as well. I had devoted so much to it. And I still am incredibly passionate about the work that I have done to this point. And I'm not done with music. Let me also clarify that. It's just going to take a different form for me. And there were some things that I had built, and then came March of 2020 and pivot, right? And that led me to making a lot of changes, which I'm very grateful for, but I'm not throwing music out. It's just kind of on a hiatus for me. But I said many times at that time, sometimes it feels as though Lisa gets lost in the mix and the only identity that people know is Miss Mast. Right? Or Professor Mast or whatever, depending on the level that I was teaching at the time. Because I've taught everything from pre-K through university. Not so much in the middle school area. But, you know, that was a huge part. And I do have skills beyond singing and waving my hands. And business and entrepreneurship has allowed me to explore those areas, be challenged in those areas, continue that lifelong learning piece. But then within the last 18 months, that I matter more than what I do, I've had another epiphany. And that I see it as kind of full circle. I matter more than what I do, and what I do matters to me. Because I finally was able to get back to the point where the things that I do can be a source of fuel and energy, as opposed to simply burnout and depleting me. And to recognize that work is not something I just have to step away from, because for a while it was, right? I really needed time to breathe. But to be able to identify what fuels me and just to have a different perspective on it. So holding those two things in tension. Do you ever really find true balance in all of that? But recognizing those things. And I'm sure I'll have other epiphanies and periods of burnout and hardship and inspiration and everything along the way.
That's part of growing.
It is. It is. But also stories of entrepreneurship were incredibly impactful to me, even while I was still teaching full time. I love the podcast, How I Built This.
That's my favorite podcast.
Love that. That was the first experience I really had with, wow, that's really awesome. I like that a lot. And I would listen to that, especially when I would drive between Oklahoma and Albuquerque. And that was one of my go-tos, that I would binge those stories. There was something that just really was appealing to me. And so it's like, oh, pay attention to those things that bring you joy, you know, that you waste, quote unquote, waste your time on, because it can be incredibly important in finding direction later on.
I am so glad. I feel like some people are a little more in tune with themselves at different times, you know, and it is hard to break a momentum.
Yes.
So when you were going along towards your PhD, and there are your family, your friends, your professors, your mentors, they all know you're doing that and they're cheering you on, but you're kind of slowing down a little bit, trying to take stock of, is this where I should be going? You know, it's breaking that momentum and trying to think about what's right for you is so tricky.
And there is so much additional respect as you move up the academic food chain. And in education, there are, I think, a lot of us who don't feel as though we receive the respect from our society in our profession. We're not treated with the same professional respect that a lot of professions have. And as a stereotype, have more respect when you're teaching at a college or university than within public school or another level. And I think that contributes to burnout when people don't feel as though their work is respected.
Well, you're not burned out anymore.
No, not in what I'm currently doing. It still has challenges, but they're different.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that.
It was finding skills that I already had that I wanted to spend my time on. And then also encountering some mentors and resources along the way, and having people affirm me in different skills. And have you offered that as a service, or you ought to charge for that? Paying attention to those little whispers sometimes, that was really key in me actually saying, you know what? I'm going to launch this business. I had 3 friends completely out of the blue, unrelated. They didn't know each other. Within a certain period of time, I had 3 different people say, have you ever considered XYZ? Because there was some opportunity that I had to help them with something. They're like, you're really good at that. You ought to pay attention to that. I'm like, huh. And then that kept happening a little bit. And then I encountered some other fortuitous opportunities. And that's the short version. And, you know, I'd had this idea in the back of my head. And here we are.
I love it. Yeah. It's, again, paying attention.
And you have to know yourself, too. Man, there was a lot of work. And that's a huge reason why I talk about the Enneagram so much. Because for me, it wasn't this, oh, here's your type, you're in a box now. It was freeing. Because when I saw the relationship between health and stress and the Enneagram descriptions, it was a wave of relief saying, I am not the only one who can feel like a pinball sometimes, because as a 1, I go to a 7 in health and a 4 in stress. And reading those descriptors of those tendencies made so much sense, because I did feel like a pinball sometimes, just bouncing around. Like, why am I so over here and then I'm over here? It's called stress. It's called, you know, tendencies. It's a bit of a roadmap, but it gave me so many more tools and was so incredibly important as I made decisions about what kind of life I wanted to have around me to be able, to live my best life, right?
That's what we all want to do. We could go on and on, but I'm going to wrap it up. But I appreciate you talking to me today and sharing more about yourself and your story and your background and then your current business, because Scissortail Digital is definitely something that I know people need. And so I'm glad to know that I can share this so people know who you are and the business that you have. So thanks for talking to me about all that.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
This was fun. Okay, everybody, that's a wrap on this week's episode. I want to thank you for listening to the Sharing Passion and Purpose podcast. It means the world to me, and I'd love to connect with you. Please follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Sharing Passion and Purpose, and Twitter at Passion Sharing. Also, if you like this podcast, it would mean a lot to me for you to subscribe, rate, and review it. And as always, all my show notes will be available on my website, sharingpassionandpurpose.com.